Okay, so yeah, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Connect Africa. So today we are going to talk about what's happening in Somalia. As we all have our ears to the ground. What's happening next to our country, to our neighbor Somalia, and especially after what happened in Ethiopia. It has got a lot of attention in what's happening in the Horn of Africa. Let's say the motive of this platform, yes, it's a Pan-African media platform, and in bringing the Somalis here to talk about Somalia is actually most of the time we hear about Somalia from the Western media, just like any country in Africa. Actually, I mean, about Ethiopia, there have been African countries who have been hearing for the whole year from BBC, CNN, rather than getting a source from Ethiopia next to right there within the continent. So it's to change that narrative and hear from the Somalis themselves what's happening. So having said that, I say welcome to our guests. We have here with us Sister Hudo Mure, Madame Jawahiri Ahir, Brother Shafi Egal, Dr. Samuel Tefera. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
All right. So our first speaker will be Sister Hodo Mure. She's a former development and public administration professional. She worked in several public sector institutions in Somalia, but currently she's an entrepreneur in Somalia from the States. So that's really interesting. She has been there, I think, for the past decade, based in Mogadishu. So she will present to us, as a Somali diaspora returning back home, what does it look like? Because most of the people right now, they think that there's no life, that to be in Somalia is still dangerous. Most of us are still with that perspective, what has been implanted in our mind from the Western media. And of course, as a Somali woman entrepreneur, and also, to give us a perspective of the Somalis from the ground, taking into consideration what's happening currently in the country. Sister Hudo, the floor is yours. She's not with us, Sister Hudo? Okay. Let's start with Brother Shafi. Are you ready? If I make you the first speaker?
Oh, thank you so much. That's a really privilege. But I prefer that the senior Jawahir and also Professor Sabal to start in our discussion, and then I will continue the other remaining topics, specifically in Somali federalism security. I will go deeply, but let me give him a chance. I think Professor Sabal, he is deserving to start our program.
Sorry, I missed that. Like, you want to speak later? I missed.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
You can start.
Yeah, no problem. I can start.
Okay, that's good. Then no, I have to introduce you, okay? Because
no problem.
Yeah. No, okay. So no, I put you as a last. Oh, maybe Sister. Okay, Sister Huro, I have to bring you to the studio. Sister Huro, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Apologies, okay. I had some problems,
Okay, I did introduce you, so maybe you were not here thinking that you are the first speaker. So yeah, welcome first.
Thank you.
Welcome to Connect Africa, and yeah, thank you for for making it in such a short time. So I said today you are going to tell us about what's happening as a Somali diaspora returnee, and you have been there for the past decade with regards to what's happening on the ground, to the reality and what has been presented in these past few days by the Western media, and also your experience as a diaspora returnee and as a woman entrepreneur, because most of us still with that narrative that Somalia is a dangerous place. So I hope you will take us through that journey. Having said that, the floor is yours, Sister Hodo.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. I think it's a timely discussion regarding what's happening in Somalia and sort of the general theme that you put forth in terms of this sort of kind of Western media narrative that's driven out there, that's quite negative and quite sometimes full of disinformation. So I've been back in Somalia for the past 9, almost 10 years now. That's not to say there are no challenges, but one of the things that happens is sort of lumping, number one, Somalia in one particular issue. Let's say if something awful happens or if there is insecurity at a particular place, the headlines that you typically see in Western media, in Reuters, in CNN, it's, this kind of like unlivable, unproductive, scary place, where in reality, Somalia is a big country. And sometimes if there are issues, or whether it's insecurity or whether it's a drought or this past couple of years we've been dealing with COVID, that's not to say that there isn't life. That's not to say that people are not progressing. That's not to say that, so there is always this kind of chosen narrative, which is all about that negative context. In terms of Somalis are quite entrepreneurial, and I think that's something that has been known all over the world. So especially when it comes to business, small businesses, women are particularly very innovative in that regard, whether they are selling, small shops, tomatoes, or whether they are running big, large operations. So sort of putting that, contextualizing the issue and not going with the just like, Somalia is burning or Mogadishu is burning. I think it's an important aspect that we need to set forth, and Somalis need to speak for themselves and say, you know what, even if we have issues related to insecurity, issues related to other things that affect maybe a lot of countries in the region or the world, those are issues that Somalis themselves can hone in and sort of deal with and decide, not this outside sort of intervention that's quite destructive, to be honest with you, not just physically, but also emotionally, because people are being told, your lives are not meaningful, peace is maybe not attainable, you've been in war for 30 years, this kind of psychological, terror itself. So that's kind of how I would like to maybe start and then take it from there. Back to you.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's indeed important. Yeah, what you said is this psychological terror, and driving us to make it look like there's always a certain measures that are taken by the Western media to make the state in their definition as a failed state, and that's exactly what I have seen, in the past 1 year in Ethiopia, in setting the narratives amongst the Western media. And yeah, it's really important to give that opportunity. It's not even, maybe opportunity is not the right word. Somalis have the right to set the record by themselves, to tell their stories. We have to learn that to listen to others. not to go to, for example, to know what's happening in Somalia, I don't have to turn BBC or CNN or Reuters. Somalia, we have this social media. I mean, it has its own pros and cons, but we can use it for a positive, for a positive things, and we can ask there our friends what's happening there, and let's give ear and let's hear. It's not about taking sides, but let's learn that, to hear the stories from the people themselves, and try to understand. That by itself is, I think, a huge achievement to leave that legacy for the next generation, that for our children, in spite of our differences, we can sit and talk and listen to each other. There's of course a difference in Africa and the rest of the world, the Western, and also within Africa, and also within our own country. Yeah, but this is really, that's the step I wanted to make today, to listen to the Somalis about Somalia. So, and I hope others will follow. So next, we have Madam Jawahir Ahir. I hope I said it right. So Madam Jawahir is an author and researcher. She's a consultant, and she is a founder and chair of the Somali Development Services, and also chair of Global Somali Diaspora. And also she's a operation manager for Compass Fostering, Compass Fostering Central, if I'm not mistaken. You are a multitasking person, but yeah, as a woman, I'm proud to see such a woman. And Madam Jawahir, the floor is yours. And let me know if I stated anything wrong there.
No, thank you, Mahlet. Your pronunciation of my name was absolutely fantastic. I hope I didn't pronounce your name, incorrectly. So thank you for inviting me in this discussion, and I think it's quite very interesting to listen, Sister Hodo, in terms of her experience and being, diaspora returnee in the country at the moment, especially in Mogadishu, where a lot of things are going on at the moment. So obviously, in terms of my hat, I think I got a lot of different hats, but my hat, I think tonight is going to be the diaspora one, as I am the chair of Somali Global Diaspora. It's an organization that provides a platform, to connect Somali diaspora globally, and we do organize a lot of different events locally, nationally, and internationally, and conferences, seminars, workshops, that is responding to whatever it is going on in the country. So actually the next one we're having is this Sunday. We're doing, humanitarian and session because the political crisis is actually shadowing the humanitarian issues that's going on also in Somalia. And so we want to put, on the spotlight as well, that still people need us, our support. So in terms of your question in relation to Somali diaspora and their role, Somali diaspora really, they have been the backbone of Somalia and Somali nation since the civil war. They're the one who actually providing in terms of finance to the families, communities affected by the civil war, and they are actually providing in terms of when you look in terms of a Somali diaspora sent back to home, they almost 3 times more than the whole international community's donation is to Somalia. So you can see that Somali diaspora actually is the lifeline of, you can say, our country, and many of them went back, like Sister Huda, and you can see all the regions, Somali diaspora returnees who actually participating in all kind of different life, is contributing in terms of education, healthcare. As you know, the civil war, destroyed all infrastructure, all the the basic services to the nation, and so the diaspora has actually filled that gap. And whether it is institutions of education, institutions of healthcare, institutions of humanitarian developmental projects, civil societies, entrepreneurial, and I'm so interesting to see Sister Huda as entrepreneur, especially Somali women. They're very entrepreneurial. In general, Somalis are very entrepreneurial, and especially Somali women, and they do help in the country in terms of to survive from the civil war, but also they are part of also rebuilding in terms of political stability, in terms of sessions relating to the humanitarian, whatever it is, drought, or it is famine, it is disasters, human disaster, or sometimes natural disasters or man-made disasters, like explosion is caused by these terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab. They're the one who always respond, spontaneously on the spot and supporting our people and our country. Having said that, obviously diaspora, they are also a part of our community. Sometimes they can be also a part of the problem, but they are also part of the solution. And if you look in terms of a political situation currently, and if you look at the current government and the previous governments as well, a majority of politicians and leaders, they are from the diaspora. And sometimes that's why people say sometimes they can't be part of the problem. However, in terms of Somali, when you talking about Somali sovereignty, Somalis are really very proud people, and they like to defend their country. They like to defend the dignity and the honor of their country, of their people, in general. However, the civil war and the follow-up consequences made country very fragile, and made the community as well sometimes using this divide and rule that has been somehow influenced. And so the crisis we're seeing today, it's not I can say it's man-made and crisis, and I think it's a lot of Somali become like a lot of resources for a lot of interest. So strategically it's a very interesting place. Somalia, it's Horn of Africa. It's to it is one of the longest beach and seaside in Africa. It has a strategic place when you look, it connects to a lot of different African countries, but also it connects in terms of the Arabian, the Red Sea. We have, also a link there. Somalia had a very various and historic relationship in terms of Far East and Middle East and in Europe. And so Somalia is situated in very strategic place, which makes it like, interesting, a place that everyone wants to get involved. However, I think Somalia, we can say that obviously international communities have supported Somalia, and we're not ungrateful people. We're grateful, whoever who has, supported us during the need. On the other hand, obviously, we don't want to be used to that support in terms of, Somalia, and dividing, our people, and kind of making, almost impossible Somalia to come together and unite and have dialogue themselves and establish their own kind of narrative and establish their own peace building based on their own culture and perspective and traditions. And if you look now, the central government and federal member state is the way it has been designed itself is disastrous. It just has been designed Somalia to fail, actually, because when you look, how can you have a country who has, 6, 7, 5, presidents? That's impossible. You can't. We have like United States, who is a federal state, but then they have one president. All the others are governors. Every governor, obviously, they have their autonomy. They have to govern themselves in autonomy, but then they have central government, which is coming all of them under the president. And so when you look at the way the Somalis political a system has been designed, which is far from, I think, from Somali culture or perspective, or and from their own and kind of systems and traditions that they used to use, is not working. We can see it's not working, even though it could have been some sort of and solution in terms of having some sort of autonomy in Somali regions that gives them the ownership in terms of to build and to govern and to have the voices in that specific regions. You cannot have 6 presidents in one country, and that I think is the crisis we're having. And so Somali diaspora has a role in terms of supporting, like, if I take an example, the Global Somali Diaspora, we had our international conference on actually end of October this year, and the themes were trust and self-reliance, and the reason we have chosen that was we have seen in terms of what civil war has done to us, basically, but also what the current situation is doing to us, and Somalis has been divided more and more and more. And so how can we use our own, culture and tradition and systems, but also take advantage in terms of the modern, political systems, that, can reconcile within our own traditions and laws and rules, because before Western came to us and before the colony, we had our own way of living. We had our own, systems in place. If there's conflict, we have our own way of solving without having, outside interference. And so it seems that now is everyone's business in terms of Somalia, and we have been stretched in so many different directions in different ways, and so it's quite very important, Somalis to really wake up and see in terms of where we're heading to, and Somali diaspora can play a great role, and still I think they are playing, even though they can be both sides, as I mentioned, because I'm not naive, and I'm not saying like Somali diaspora they smooth and they haven't done anything wrong, but Somali diaspora is part of the Somali society, and sometimes when there is this division, especially the clan system, people are so sensitive and to go into different directions. But I think the key thing is about how can we bring back our sovereignty? How can we bring back our own ways of solving our conflicts, without relying others, and we need to understand that. And those who are supporting us, international communities who are supporting us, we don't want to make that support condition of to go their own ways. No, if that support is actually conditioned on in terms of to govern or jeopardize Somali sovereignty, then we shouldn't be accepting that kind of support. Actually, if they want to support Somalia, they have to support in a neutral way, and they shouldn't be part of the conflict. And so Somalis need to solve their own problems. Somalis need to come together and sit on the table and talk and have dialogue, instead of having this threats and clans, militia and all kind of stuff. In the past, the Somalis used to come and sit under the tree, and our elders or people, they used to come and sit and talk when there's conflict. and we had our own way of traditions of solving, and we need to go back our roots. We need to realize our heritage. We need to utilize our resources, and there's so many that uniting us than dividing us, and we shouldn't be accepting those who are coming and trying to choose sides, and in order to make the situation more fragile and more volatile. So I think I talked too much, but I'm happy to contribute the rest of the tonight. But I think I'm gonna stop there. Thank you again, Mahlet.
Okay, no, thank you. No, thank you. Really, you really you raised a very good important points, which is the Somali diaspora. Yes, indeed, it has been the backbone of in terms of building the economy and everything. Somalia after the war, the 2 decades war. But also sometimes it can be part of the problems, and of course, yeah, it's all we're learning, we're listening here and learning, and I'm sure the other audience and viewers who have joined us here, this is exactly, I mean, it's good to raise a question, but let's learn, let's listen, let's give them ear, and also the other point is whenever we turn to this, whoever it is, Western, Eastern, but a non-Somalia state or a non-African state for a solution, let's not just get carried away. I mean, there should be a line that where we have to say no in terms of defending our sovereignty, and also the part that where you said to how can we utilize our own way of conflict resolution, that the traditional way. I mean, traditional as opposed to what? I mean, I don't know. The words are sometimes by themselves very derogative and provocative. But yeah, we have our own way of conflict resolution where we have been successful, or Somalia has been successful. I say we also, some of the things, it also works being an Ethiopian, to speak from the Ethiopia point of view, or in general in Africa. Yeah, those are really indeed important. Let me just see what the audience is saying so far. Mostly it's the no more trending in hands of Somalia, and it's a good discussion, or it portrays realism. This one is, I think, Somali language, Guleyi Sohodo, hands of Somalia. Yeah, so we move now to our brother Shafi Egal. He is the only male speaker from Somalia. And I took a little bit of a pleasure in saying that, because I'm all woman empowerment. I see my sisters talking here. That makes me happy. But I do believe that you are happy as much as I'm happy. So yeah, so brother Shafi Mahmoud Egal, he is by profession a federalism and counterterrorism expert. He has an extensive experience in government offices and regional and international organizations. His professional journey include working for civic society organizations, in coordinating in management of reconciliation, counterterrorism, federalism, constitutional design, and state building and peace building interventions in Somalia. So today he will share with us, the current politics in Somalia, give us a background, what's happening. All we hear is just, the PM, the Prime Minister versus the President, how this also Madam Jawahiri has raised, the way the political structure is built by itself is kind of makes it destined to fail for the system. So maybe you share with us, because it relates with your profession. Without further ado, the floor is yours, Brother Shafi.
Thank you so much, Mahlet. I really appreciate. Yeah, nowadays we have some revolution of women all positions they are now the best rather than in a man. And we believe that to be our leaders, they are very tireless. Somali women are very strong. So no problem. I'm very glad to be here today and discuss with my sister Hodo and Chawari. And I will go that I will try to have some very precise and concise in a background that what is going on in Somalia. Does the conflict is it starting now or
Before I see that, sorry to interrupt, I see that you have logged in two accounts. One is a PowerPoint. You want me to bring it to the studio, and as you speak from the background for us to see the PowerPoint, does that work? Because I see you in two login, like two, you have two logins here. Are you there?
Yeah. Did you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. If the intention of the PowerPoint to have it here is to share it and maybe wanted to speak behind, or you just talk.
No problem. It's okay. If you can see me well, one stream. Oh.
Okay, go on.
I will try to precise and concise the concept of the conflict between the Somali government and how that the international community interpreted and how the media make very sensitive nowadays. I will try to focus on how the Somali federal structure is and how what's causing the conflict that there have been Somali federal government cannot move the last 4 years. Does it conflict between only executive or executives or legislative, or also there is a conflict between the federal member states and also and federal government? I will try. Let me start that in a concept that the Somali is a federal structure which is contains the federal, state, and local governance. And also the president is the head of state, as well as the prime minister also is a head of government. The country is a bicameral legislature, which is Senate and National Assembly. Senate is the upper house, and also it has the lower house. The constitution does give us different powers regarding to the, for example, the Senate, they have only 4 powers, but the mostly of related to the regulations and law will be responsible for the law, however. But also Somalia, it has state administration such as Galmudug, Jubaland, Puntland, Southwest, Hirshabelle, and also somehow de facto as in Somaliland. And also they use when it comes that the election is or the government power sharing formula. There's a formula which is called 4.5 clan quota sharing, which is all clans they have in the same numbers, which is it has in a background that after having a civil war in Somalia, there is a lot of mistrust among the clans, which is people. That's the only formula that people to come together and to share at least some kind of government to have in the same powers. Also, in Somalia, the main causes of this federal government is there is a different view in academically speaking. There is a different view regarding from the Somali view, also from the international community. Somalis believe is that this is the standard of this federalism kind of this government caused by the civil war, caused by the mistrust among the Somali community. And also some people believe is that maybe this people believe is that the only way that we can have a reconciliation instrument to come together and at least to share in a government. Some people, some scholars believe is that decentralization demand is one of the top consideration in federalism in Somalia. For example, people believe is that why some states they argued, some districts, why do we gonna go in Mogadishu when we have in our service in here? So this is another very strong argument that people they need federalism because of public service delivery. The other one is this is related to the power of sharing to having a self rule and self rule and share rule. And also there's a very strong Somali people also believes that this kind of federal government system imposed by the international community or pressure from international community to divide or to make a state division. This is in a general overview how people believe is that how this is a government started from. Apart from that, Somali politics and also Somali conflict and also constitutional crisis is not only executive offices. Also, this is related to state administration and federal government. The last 4 years, and also the state formation was a very critical in Somalia. The division of power and responsibility between the federal government, federal member states, and also local government is totally missing. Somehow, at least four articles that mention the constitution, but this one of the causes that the continuous conflict between state administration and federal government. And also some people that some states they argued that causes of continued conflict between federal government and federal member states is not causing only the division of power. Also, there is a political intervention that the federal government have and a very strong political intervention regarding to the states. And also the conflict also started from the after drafting the federal election law, which is signed by the president of Ramajo. The other very important is when comes that when apart from that conflict between federal government and federal member states, there's a very hot issue between the President Vermacho and also the Prime Minister regarding to the issue of the difference between that how the international community see and also how what's going on inside the reality. The international community see that Farmajo and Roble, they have a kind of political competition, and they worry about the civil war. But the reality is, the Farmajo, he accused that some Roble, which is accused that Roble has intervened with a probe into the land grab cases and drawing his mandate to organize elections. And also, he announced that to suspend the powers of the prime minister. But also, the prime minister that accused that the Farmajo is trying to have cap attempt or also there is continue president office for election interventions. That's how reality is going on in the Somalia. But the reality, the international community view is different from what's going on there, and this is caused by this continued conflict caused by the missing of some instrument of some institutional conflict solutions, which is allows them to have a continuous conflict. But international community seems that they see on this kind of conflict, they see in a very alarming and civil war. And I see that a lot of articles and a lot of news that shows Mogadishu is panning and there's a continuous civil war. But for us, we don't see that. This is a very small conflict, which is caused by the constitutional crisis. This is caused by the missing of institutional conflict kind of solutions. And also the most important thing is to know that what causes that this continued conflict between President Farmajo or Prime Minister and Roble, or what's caused by the continued conflict between federal government or federal member states because of the conflict, whether he's going vertical or horizontal. Also, he's in each office in a federal government or each office in a way that the state government or local government. And this is caused by the, I have been observing that this is caused by the number one, the missing is a constitutional court, which is the watchdog, which has the only institution that can have enough power, at least if there is conflict, to go there. Totally the country doesn't have any constitutional code which allows the continued conflict. And also the other thing is that allows that we have this kind of conflict, included the missing of institutional conflict management. Even we don't have Somali, Somali historical, they have a kind of hair which is historical conflict management in a way. Even nowadays, that in a government we don't have, we have still only one institution that allows whether conflict, whether state level or local governance, we go international community. That's and how international community that they have a good opportunity to manage the conflict where they view. And nowadays we see that even some international community, we are waiting for them, their Twitter or their news, at least which say they are or what they say, what about to say that this kind of conflict. That's how we are using constitutional conflict management. And this is also caused by this continued conflict caused by inequality of state difference. For example, some states they have they have a more conflict than others. Some states they believe that they don't have much enough political support or administration support or project support, and they complained that the federal government we have still conflict whether regarding to the resource deficiencies, inequality. That's also another very sensitive cause of conflict between the federal government and federal member states. The other one is it's the rigidity of constitution, which is very difficult. The constitution is a professional constitution, which is very view and cannot occupy all powers in a government. And also, even there is no space, there is no constitutional space regarding to the federal member states to access their powers. And that's also another very difficult to have the continued in a government in the last 4 years. The other one is a very danger, which is this conflict may be in Abuja, the cessation of Abuja, which is likely caused by the federal government. If this continues, should have to continue conflict. This causes cessation of some states. For example, in Puntland or Jubaland, they argue that the last 4 years they argued that the federal government they have groups, allies, which is working for their interest, political interest. But the reality is this is in a very danger, academically speaking, and causes in a cessation of Abuja. And this is needs Somali people to work themselves rather than waiting in the international community to have conflict for their interest. The other one is a very interesting that we needed to focus in Abuja is reinforcing cleavage, such as rather than building unity, we see our interest rather than in our unity and for national or regional honor. We see the continuous individual interest or group interest. This is one of the political culture in Somalis and also in Horn Africa. The other one is the attention of minority races within minority. This is also another very critical issue. I have been working for the Hirshabelle state, and I see that some clans inside of Hirshabelle, they complain about the state, where the state complaining the federal government. So this is also needs to have the institutional cooperation from minority to majority rules, or from the ground district level to the federal level, to have some kind of political inclusiveness. That's what I'm going to conclude it. When I'm going to conclude it that how the Somali views that regarding to the regional cooperation, or regional working together, Somalia and Eritrea and Ethiopia. And this, I will go back that one after discussion of Professor Samuel, and I will have some view that regarding to the how Somalis believe is in Horn Africa, and I will go that laterly. But I really appreciate that for your having me, and this is what I'm concluding. Thank you so much.
I don't think I can hear you. I don't know whether you others can hear.
Sorry, I could have gone for the next 20 minutes like that. I was so comfortable.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, good. Now, what I was saying is, yes, you did raise we have to talk. Yeah, we do have to talk, putting the differences aside, and of course, but just not talk. We need to get the results as well, a solution. That's what we need to get at. But before that, of course, talking comes first. What's interesting is also, in a way, most of the problem for me from what you talked kind of point at there is a constitutional vacuum. Correct me if I misunderstood, but that's where it's pointing at, and what can be done, and also how about someone commented here also a Somali solution for a Somali problem, which is really what we say. At the end of the day, the solution comes from the Somali people themselves. It's not from Ethiopia, it's not from Kenya, it's not from America, it's from the Somali people themselves. And what are the steps? Are there any hope? What should be the first step to go on that direction? So there are some questions here, of course, with regards to the international community is here in the comment section that I see. Who and what is the international community? Like it's in inverted comma. Yeah, because I do have a problem with that term, because we hear this, sometimes you repeat this fake news, and then it become, as if it's true. International community, international, but international what? I mean, it's a bunch of Western countries that they call, the power is in their hands. All the humanitarian organizations, the UN, everything is in few Western countries' hand. So that's a very good question. Who and what is the international community in inverted comma? So next, or our last speaker is Dr. Samuel. I don't see him. Okay, he's here. Let me add him. Dr. Samuel, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me? I can hear you well.
Okay, so very good. Yeah, I hope you have been listening what has been said from by the previous speakers. Dr. Samuel Tefera, he's Ethiopian. He's from Ethiopia. We have all our Somali speakers, and it's good also to have an Somali perspective in terms of the Horn Alliance. So without going. Before I talk about the topic, let me just introduce briefly Dr. Samuel. He's assistant professor at Addis Ababa University. He's actually a multi-professional. He's a researcher. He published various articles. He's also a lecturer. He participates, he's an analyst of the Horn of Africa politics, but amongst us in Ethiopia, he's also known for being, advocate for that regional cooperation in Horn of Africa, or the Greater Horn of Africa, or the Eastern Africa, you can call it. So Dr. Samuel, I haven't gone through with a lot of things. I know I just tried to put it brief. The floor is yours. What can you tell us about this Horn of Africa Alliance in terms of what is going on related to what's going on now in Somalia? What are the challenges and opportunities that we see? Yes.
Thank you, Mahlet, and good evening, everybody. Hodo, Johair, and Shafi. Let me start with, I've been listening to your talk, starting from Hodo, which was mentioning about the psychological terror that Somali women have in Somalia, in their day-to-day activities, and the issues related to the role of Somalia diaspora and development issues associated to it by Jawahir and the political structure and political issues related to federalism and the current situation, political situation in Somalia and in the region by Shafi. So let me start with my agreement with Shafi that the situation is so much exaggerated. Like we've been noticing what's going on regarding the situation that we have in Ethiopia. Uh, Given the news that's coming from the West, the kind of interventions, the kind of political memos and communications that countries elsewhere outside of the Horn are making, is so unfair and full of fake news, and the same exaggeration, the same stretching of the situation beyond the context is happening in Somalia. That's my perception. I'm not saying that there are problems. Of course, we have still problems associated to the movement of Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is mounting attacks everywhere in Somalia, including Mogadishu. We have natural hazards, problems related to desert locust, food security issues, drought. At the same time, we have flood. Security issues are still there, and the latest of all the problems are the election-related problems that are creating a lot of mess in the country. I mean, following the introduction of the clan-based electoral model in Somalia, there have been different reactions associated to it. You know, this kind of model actually works through electing indirectly lawmakers through clan leaders, right? Okay, speaking of vernacular traditional political systems and putting those kind of arrangements that very much resembled the Somali culture or our culture. I presume myself as half Somali because that we have largest Somali communities in Ethiopia. We have the most peaceful region in Ethiopia as we speak now is Somali region, and I would assume that lessons can be learned from this experience as well. People would always think when you mention the name of Somalia as somewhere there is always a conflict, a problem, and all those challenges beyond control. Not always this is true. Somalis are very famous for their vernacular humanitarianism activities, supporting their people, supporting their government. As Jawahir was mentioning, they are the backbone of the Somali nation and the lifeline of many Somalis who felt hopeless living in the country, particularly post the civil war. So this coming back to the election model, that particularly would have supports and will also have people opposing to it. Particularly, the crisis came following Muhammad Abdullahi's or Formajo's introduction of this one person, one vote reform, right? And to me, these are issues that should be contested, that should be debated, and for a country who relies strongly on its diaspora, particularly in terms of participation in leadership, in terms of participation in economic activities, all options should be brought forward and all options should be discussed. That's my say. We've also other problems related to the appointment of commissioners, particularly in Gedo district of Jubaland. Shafi was trying to mention a bit, and the issues the federal government of Somalia had with Kenya. Also, it particularly also ties to this specific argument. And we can mention quite a lot of this kind of issues, which are very much common for a country who has been going through all these problems for the past 3-4 decades. But the issue has to be dealt with Somalis themselves, while particularly speaking of foreign intervention and external interventions from countries who have a different strategic and geopolitical interests, where Jawahir was mentioning a bit. What we need to be more concerned about it is that always development assistance is tied with strings, particularly like strategic, economic, and political interests. The West has had interests, geopolitical interests for years, probably for centuries, in the Horn of Africa, in the Bab el Mandeb, in the West Indian Ocean coast, and the Red Sea, particularly because This is the passing point, the lifeline of most of countries in the West. Like the economic goods and services pass through this particular area. You have the issue of piracy, you have terrorism, you have different interests. Countries in the Middle East, the relationship that they have with Israel, the West, the US, and the growing China, Turkey, Iran. The region that we live in, the Horn of Africa, is very susceptible to various kinds of challenges. So the Somalis are not the only ones who are part of this problem. We are together with them, the Djiboutians, the Eritreans, the Kenyans. We are all in this. So some of the challenges need an answer, a response, not only from the Somalis, but also from all other countries that make up the Horn. We need to work more on issues that strengthen the Somali Nemo and the Horn Nemo, because none of these challenges could be addressed by a single intervention from member states, particularly IGAD member states. So these issues related to geopolitical interests are somehow beyond our control. They cannot be addressed alone. So we need to work together. In this regard, the recent rapprochement between Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia, which previously, in terms of the state-wise politically, considered to be hostile to each other, is a very good advance of our time. That's a big advance to me, because the rapprochement that we have that with Somalia has changed quite a lot. It opens up rooms for cooperation in areas of maritime security, in areas of trade, in areas of cultural exchange, because we are the same people speaking the same language, only divided by colonial boundaries. So our ideals, our day-to-day interactions, our history of trade, and the spreading religion has a very strong foundation and base, and our actions should also speak to what our culture, to what our economic relations are based particularly. So I cannot say much. Much of it was mentioned by my brother Shafi and my two sisters. So what we need to focus more on is strengthening the kind of cultural and political and trade capital that we have as families and as brothers and sisters. The level of fraternity that we have in common is very big. And to this regard, I would like to mention particularly the Somali International Conferences, which I have had a chance to take part last year, I think in Jiga, where delegates from Somalia, Somaliland, Djibouti, Ethiopian Somali, and diasporas from Canada and Europe have been in attendance, and you clearly see that kind of solidarity, that brotherhood, that sisterhood that we share among ourselves, and the kind of exchanges, intellectual exchanges that we make through this kind of associations should also make the way in the platforms for more discussions, for more debates among ourselves, and also the challenge that we have as members of the Greater Horn of Africa could only be addressed through this. The power struggle at Villa Somalia, or the current situations that we have, internal conflicts in Ethiopia, in South Sudan, are very, very small conflicts compared to the collective challenges that we face as members of the Horn of Africa in general. You've been mentioning about the different narratives that the international community has when it comes to issues around the Horn of Africa. They all emanate from their own political agendas and political interests. So unless we're united, we cannot win such kind of discourses. The rise and fall of Ethiopia is directly the rise and fall of Somalia. In the rise and fall of Somalia, a disturbed, destabilized Somalia is a headache for Ethiopia as well. You have people who would be displaced through conflicts. You'd be people who would be hungry, who would be psychologically unstable, and this cannot make you sleep well. these are challenges that we all share in common. So we also need to contribute to the solutions together. So not only at leadership levels, but also at intellectual discourses like what we are doing now. A series of discussions should happen there. Our countries do not need power vacuum. It's not time. So many have been talking about this power vacuum that's going to come very soon. I mean, that's an exaggeration, of course, as I have been saying, in Somalia, because of the challenge that they have with elections. Election challenges are not new to Africa. They have always been there. But the problem is, like, how are you going to bring a resolve to this? The conflict, the political conflict, rivalry between Formaggio and Roble should not be beyond the national interests of Somali as a country and Somalia as people. So these are things that should be resolved very easily through discussions, and this, the priority is for the Somalis themselves to address their challenges, but also as brothers and sisters, members of the IGAD country should also help whenever an intervention is needed. Otherwise, the more divided we are, the more challenges we're going to face, particularly challenges coming from the West. So the only concern that I have is when Jawahir was mentioning about how neutral foreign interventions should be. To me, I don't think that they would be neutral, as far as they are attached to some forms of political and economic interests. We cannot. I don't think we should be very humble enough to entertain such kind of ideas. We have seen that. We have learned a lot through the various forms of interventions. None of the countries, particularly the United States in the West, to whom in an intervention has been happening, has brought justice, has brought stability, has brought democracy in all the countries that those interventions had taken place. A very good example is Syria. A very good example can be Yemen. A very good example still can be Afghanistan. In all those countries, Libya in Africa, then there have been interventions. So what was life post intervention and before intervention? So I think we need to learn a lot from those experiences, and we need to stand together in order to address our challenges. I think this is what I would want to say. Thank you.
Quickly, I mean, we all the speakers have done now. It's open for discussion or reflection. But quickly, before I forget, on what you said, Dr. Samuel, you are there with us, right?
I'm there.
Okay, good. When you said that we cannot deal as Horn of African countries, especially problems related to geopolitics, we cannot deal it alone. Are you? I mean, it's kind of vague. I can assume what you're saying, but to make it explicit. So, are you saying we have to deal it as a Horn of Africa together, or is it including those who have interests? The non-African states or the Western African countries? What are you referring when you say we cannot deal alone? Then how should we deal?
Thank you. I mean, if I get your points clear, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, the particularly issues related to geopolitical interests of the West and the East as well are not issues that Somalia can handle by itself. These are not issues Ethiopia can handle by itself, or any of members of the IGAD region. Why? Because the kind of political capability, the kind of stability that we need to have in our countries is not strong enough in terms of countering the kind of political and military challenge that potentially can be put on us. So, for example, Somalia has a very long maritime border along the West Indian Ocean, and controlling the maritime security of that particular area cannot be dealt within the current capacity of the Somalia alone. The same thing with Eritrea, the same thing with whoever has that kind of maritime border along the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean. You need to have, or you need to develop that kind of military intelligence capability in order to control, in order to surveillance, in order to monitor your region from potential terrorist attacks, from potential superpower interests that would cause you a problem later. So we need to have a kind of modality that brings all together on the table and put our fair share in terms of securing our own region. A very good example is probably the Somalia-Turkey relations in terms of securing the area. Turkey as an emerging power in the region that also respects our interests. The kind of relations that Turkey has with Somalia and Turkey has with Ethiopia is very good in terms of making a balance between the kind of intervention and political interest that the West and the East has in that particular region. So Turkey is, compared to other countries in the Horn of Africa, it's still a foreign country, although it has some interests that we share collectively together. But imagine if we can collaborate together. Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, Kenya, that would make more sense, because this is a collaboration between people and between nations of similar interest, and between members of the Horn family. So we share a number of issues together, challenges together, and then we have also good potentials to grow together and to make the region more stable and strong, and also to make it a buffer against any Western or Eastern power who have some economic and political strategic interests that would work or that would stand against the interests of our people and our region. So that's what I mean when I say we need to work together. The issue of geopolitics would always prevail there. Some scholars refer to the term as a disease. Geopolitics by itself is a disease, because it doesn't want any contender, it doesn't want any power to emerge, to come out and control that sphere of influence, political, economic, and military sphere of interest. Whoever is a leader would want to remain and stay there as a leader forever. So in the debate of geopolitical concept or geopolitical issues, no new country is wanted to emerge to be big power. Always the big powers, the superpowers, would want you to remain their loyal partner. So they don't allow you to be an influential partner. They don't want you to be a very developed, in terms of military capacity, in terms of economy, in terms of political muscles. No one would want you to grow big, because if you're a contender, if you're a competitor, you cannot be obliged to accept to their rule of the games. You will be the one who would set the agenda for yourself and for your region, depending on the facts on the ground, and from the fact that you wanted to promote your own economic and political interests. So this can be only possible through a collaborative engagement between members of the whole country and advancing causes of regional integration. And one such a capability can be made through connecting the Horn of Africa through electrification processes. I don't want to extend your discussion. That was why I tried to keep quiet. But the issue of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and the fact that I'm always promoting this kind of issues has a very significant meaning in terms of how we can make the Horn greater. Ethiopia, by producing 6,000 megawatts of electricity, is not going to only fulfill its energy demands. That part of that energy is going to be exported to countries in the Horn, which means with electrification and connection of electrification grids in the Horn by countries in the Horn of Africa, you would open opportunities to develop more manufacturing industries, and those industries would attract, the energy would attract more investors from within and outside, which is directly associated to attracting foreign direct investment. And when countries become economically dependent on one another, no country would be sponsoring terrorists, no country would be arming groups to destabilize countries in the Horn of Africa. I mean, like its neighbors. So the basic democracy, some scholars say basic democracy, even would want an improvement in the standard of living. If you don't have energy, if you don't have industries, you cannot give your people a very good access to education services. Education depends on electricity. Education depends on good economic development. If you cannot provide your people with the right education, you cannot produce deliberate and informed students or citizens. And if you lack those citizens, you cannot have a very good and informed decision makers nationally who would always prioritize the interests of their people and the interests of their nation against their own political wills and interests. So this is what I mean by improving ways and platforms for more integration and more cooperation among the countries. So a developed Horn would be heard very well. Its voice would be very strong. It will be a competing emerging giant against all other superpowers. It won't be always a loyal partner, right? That's what I mean by advancing cooperation between countries in the Horn of Africa. I think I make myself clear this time.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Yeah, it's that's the regional integration as its best. We need all those integration, not only in terms of security, but also in terms of economy, which is really, I think, a major one. Once we have that economic integration, we can achieve so many things. Let me come back to my Sister Hudo and Madam Jawari. I would love to hear if you can reflect on this, because something untouched subject, neither by Sister Hudo nor by Madam Jawari, regarding the Horn of Africa rapprochement, especially what has been initiated by the three countries, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. What is your say on that? Who can start?
I can start. Actually,
Okay.
from our discussion so far, it's clear that what we're talking about is beyond sort of the single narrative story, the sort of the destructive story that usually tends to come out, particularly in Somalia. From our discussion, Sister Jawahir talked about the contribution of diaspora, the sort of being the sort of the bloodline and not sinking into Somalia further economic damage. When you really look at the numbers, we're talking about between 25% to 30% of the overall GDP of Somalia is diaspora contribution. That typically does not make the headlines, because usually, you're talking about all sort of the negative aspect of what's happening in Somalia, whether it's politics or whether it's some of these other natural issues regarding locusts, droughts, climate issues. So that's one aspect that I'm very glad that this discussion sort of touched on. The other aspect that also Brother Igal talked about is sort of the origins of some of the problems in Somalia are in sort of the way the system, and he kind of clearly articulated that sometimes the system that the Somalis themselves perceive as a system that was imposed upon them, that has fragilities within, so that's prone to create clash, prone to create problems within the federal government and within also federal member states. But in solving that and in thinking about solutions, if the origins of the problem is based on the system that was brought or sort of opposed on the Somali people as a solution, then the issues that arise from that, then the solution also cannot come from the outside. So when we say, you know, hands off Somalia and no more, what we are speaking to is that if we have problems that are sort of mired in our systems because our systems are kind of sometimes maybe foreign driven, then the solution is not. And also the other thing that the professor touched on clearly is sometimes these countries that are intervening, they might seem, you know, the intervention might seem sometimes benign, but also the intervention is not uniform. One country might be suggesting this as an option, another country is suggesting something else as an option. So then you have a confusion within the system, within even the public as to how to proceed. So that's why this Western driven intervention is not going to be a solution, because number one, it's not one size fits all. And also they themselves, as much as they seem to be in the same bucket, they don't offer the same solutions. You can clearly see sometimes even in Twitter, different countries and different embassies tweeting sort of different suggestions. Sometimes they might seem kind of uniform, but of course they're not. So in terms of moving forward and the region, the Horn of Africa, I think our strength is also a part of also what's happening and sort of the reawakening, if I can call it that, of people, of understanding the issues, of understanding how intervention is problematic from the get-go, and also the intervention is maybe driven because of greater strategic interest, greater economic interest, or maybe often extraction of resources from the Horn of Africa. As the professor also greatly put it, between Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, Ethiopia, you're talking about a vast wealth of resources, vast wealth of, and from the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. So working together, coming together in terms of building economic cooperations that can uplift people from poverty, building infrastructure for energy development, building infrastructure for educational development will greatly contribute to sort of buffing or sort of pushing back this intervention that seems destructive, as we can clearly see. And I also want to highlight something that Brother Igal talked about. Sometimes the reality on the ground and how it's sort of talked about, how it's promulgated, that psychological terror that I mentioned earlier, are sort of disconnected. The problems might exist, but they exist in a system that has fragility. They exist in a system that Somalia is recovering. But when sort of the Western intervention comes in, it's always sort of danger, danger, danger. If you don't do this, if you don't do that, you know, you are sort of going back to civil war or et cetera, et cetera. And when we know from reality, the Somali people are not interested in anything like that. Whatever there are frictions or discussions, and even in the past, not this current administration, in previous administrations, there were issues, there were things that needed to be worked on. There are issues between different institutions within the federal government, the executive, the legislative, etc. And typically, when those issues have been resolved, they have been resolved by discussions, by spearheading from the Somali people. So that's also important sort of to highlight, to say that whatever issues regarding security, regarding administration, it's not going to come from the outside. In terms of how this prolonged, protracted election process plays into some of the fragilities, as the brother mentioned, because the election is indirect, it's coming through the federal member states. Obviously, it has taken a lot longer than a lot of people have anticipated that it would, but it's ongoing. The upper house, it's already complete. and the lower house is on traction to be done. And issues are anticipated to arise, and they have risen actually in the past, and they have been resolved among the Somali stakeholders themselves. So that's some of the things that I would like to highlight, and I think I will leave it at that. Back to you.
Thank you, Sister Hodo. Really, it's a very good reflection on that one. Madam Jawahiri, regarding still on this Horn of Africa rapprochement, I know that I know for a fact that there are people in the Horn and also from the Somali society who are for it, and some also have some reservation. Can you share with us what do you think about it?
So thanks, Mahlet, again. And I think it's quite very interesting discussion that has been put forward this evening by the speakers, and I think, and especially if I may reference Dr. Samuel talking about the approachment of Horn of Africa. I think in principle, I think having collaborative, and some sort of platform and alliance within the Horn of Africa, I think is a good thing. And when you look, like for example, Europe, when you look, how many countries you're talking about, 27 countries who making, and forging, a collaborative approach, because they have actually realized that they need each other, and they do need to, share and utilize resources and expertise and support each other. And I think it could be like a kind of a dream, isn't it? Like African Union, we have established, years and years, decades back, African Union. We should have actually filled that role in terms of to make, African countries and more, bringing together, more, collaborative, more kind of having, kind of, trade and investment and economically in between them, working together. And I think that some, to a certain extent has not been succeeded. So one can, for example, argue whether that, reasons lies with African themselves, or sometimes lies also with foreigners as well. That, Africa has been, obviously, with, colony and also, these, borders that has been, designed to Africa, have always conflicts between themselves and not actually seeing themselves as, an entity, as a African continent, and so on and so on. So there is a lot of root causes that you can, actually, see an examples. But I think in terms of, as Dr. Samuel, mentioned, in terms of Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, like if you look in the past, even a couple of years ago, it was kind of impossible to think of this kind of format. And I think the more people come together and collaborate and work together, the more it's better. And it's the same in a country like we're talking about now, Somalia. And if Somali people come together and work together and collaborate in common interest, the more they actually progress, the more they reach their goals, the more they can actually thrive, and so on. And it's similar. So always, coming together and working together has more, benefits. And of course, there is always challenges. There's always these barriers and things that need to be overcome. But and at the same time, I think Dr. Samuel has a couple of times mentioned, Kenya, because I am mindful at the moment, because, we have some sort of, maritime dispute and issues between Somalia and Kenya. And I think currently it's not, thinkable to have that kind of collaborative. Obviously, in the future, it could be, things always change. It's similar like Ethiopia, a couple of years ago. And so on. And so I think, Africa, if they can have more collaborative approach, countries can thrive, can benefit their society if they even open the borders to have. But that also requires a capacity and governance and a lot of things to be developed. If I come back in terms of the Western kind of interference, and it's true, if we say here, isn't it, there's no such a free lunch. and anyone who gives you something, obviously they want something back, and that is a natural, that is human and kind of mindset. However, we have to look what kind of strings are touched in terms of the support we're getting. If that's is about at the expenses of our sovereignty, if it's about expenses of our dignity, it's about at the expenses of our own honor, then why should we accept that? And we shouldn't, and that's why we should be negotiating. And sometimes people say, like, if you actually you're beggar, you can't have much choices, you can't choose it. and a country like Somalia that has been suffering for the last decades in a civil war and from one disaster to another, I can understand that the country needs to stand on its feet. And as Dr. Samuel and mentioned, it's a reality that need to be addressed, and one cannot do that it's by itself. It needs the other support, but it has to, I think Somalia has to choose their friends very carefully, and those that the genuine friends and those who want to support. And that's why I think I liked it that the Dr. Samuel mentioned Turkey, which I think has brought to the Horn of Africa totally different dynamic, different kind of and way of in addressing and supporting intervention, different way of intervention that actually provides and harness the country's sovereignty, the country's nation and stability, which reflecting in terms of what country needs. Like for example, when our agriculture, they are actually, for example, at the time of harvest, if US produce brings for example, and all these and maize kind of donation, and that actually brings that means that our farmers are not able to sell their products. That is actually destabilizing our agriculture, our farmers, and so on. And so it has to be the support we need, it has to be the one we needed, and Somalia should be able to negotiate and not actually sell their for example and honor and dignity in at the expenses of getting some sort of support. And so that's why I'm saying that we need to reflect in terms of the international communities. It's a time they review, and I think very quickly Dr. Samuel gave examples in terms of the intervention in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya. What's happening and what kind of aftermath these countries are actually struggling and so on. And are we learning from that, or are we just for example blindly following in terms of whatever kind of intervention that has been brought to to us, and therefore it requires a decision that sometimes is very, very difficult to take, and you obviously have to sometimes face the consequences in maybe short term, but I think in the long term, Somalia would be well off if they themselves return to themselves. And Somalia is a very, very rich country, and when you look in terms of the Somali maritime, when you look at smart resources, the agriculture, the livestock, fishery, we are very rich. But in terms of, we're not utilizing our resources. We're not actually, the country is very big. Everyone can, have, a huge space in the country. There's no need to fight for land or deed. And so I think in terms of the situation of Somalia, obviously, is not as simple. It's very complex, and it's very, dynamic, and it's evolving. And but at the same time, I feel if there's, we say where there's will, there's always way. If Somalis wake up and even if we have a few Somali people who who unite, and the honesty, and in terms of their vision, and have vision, they can win. The Somalis who fought for the independence, there was a lot of obviously struggle, but the latest the end, this Somali we call SYL, the Somali Youth League. There were 13 of Somali youth, and so and who actually and won the struggle of colonialism. So I think it's quite important, recognize the challenges that we're facing, the political one, the economic one, the humanitarian one, the infrastructure, the capacity, and B is what in terms of what the solution of Somalis lies in terms of with the current political. When you look back at the previous administration, as brother Ismail mentioned, is that how many prime ministers did President Hassan Sheikh change it? He had a conflict with, and so it is about in terms of president appointing prime minister, and then they have conflict and changing another one, and it's a part of, it is part of growing, and it's part of actually creating some sort of understanding about the democratic rule of law, but also forging understanding and a common interest of Somalis themselves. And so I think, and I see IGAD and African Union has have both role to play in terms of and bringing a more collaborative approach and through Africa solution. But the limitation also, it's there because the Western resource and funds has also influence on them as well, because African Union and IGAD also and they partially, or if not all, funded also by Western donors. So it is how economically I think economically can you overcome in terms of this dependency, and I think to overcome dependency requires, and especially Somalis or Horn of Africa, and to work together. If you want to become self-reliant, you need to work together. And in order to work together, you need to create that trust, because that trust within Somalis, as has been mentioned, and Brother Ismail, the civil war has damaged our trust within ourselves. And I think again the Horn of Africa as well, there is historic conflicts that has been also damaging years and years and years. So you need to gradually build that trust between the community, between the countries, Horn of Africa countries, in order to create that collaborative approach, because one cannot be self-reliant unless you collaborate with others. And in order to collaborate together, you need that trust to create that trust. So it's quite very interesting, and I think it's very complex, and there's no simple answer to address it.
Interesting. Thanks. Yeah, but complex, but we need to break it, and we have to do what we have to do in order to reach where we need to reach. Yes. Now
I would like to. I would like to add.
And actually, before, don't forget your point. And there is this one question. I don't know if you can take it up. There's one person who asks, if it's related with what we are going to talk. Should we focus the claims of clans, or should we focus the claims of states to solve the extreme conflicts in Somalia? Yeah, and you may add with what you're saying.
That's a complex question in and itself. But I just wanted to sort of highlight something Sister Jawahir talked about, how sort of unity or national unity among the Somalis is really part and parcel of the solution. If the Somalis, either a segment, or hopefully I'm more optimistic that large percentage of people, whether they are in Somalia particularly or in the diaspora, can come together, that is the solution. National unity is the solution. Some of these other issues that are also happening in the country, people are sort of collaborating together, whether it's fighting locust invasion, whether it's developing the agricultural sector, whether it's trying to mitigate issues related to drought. There is a lot of humanitarian, a lot of goodwill among the Somali people. So just sort of harnessing that energy and further making it something that can create sort of a barrier, so foreign intervention is not so stark. I think something that I wanted to highlight. The other thing that I also wanted to highlight that also the professor talked about and Sister Jawahir elaborated is, yes, you can have a sort of a international community. That word is quite interesting. But Turkey is a sort of a regional power that has also been helping, particularly Somalia, in ways that the Somali government and the Somali people are comfortable with. So that kind of collaboration, that level of respect, that level of dignified interaction can happen. So when we are talking about sort of aid and who gives this and who gives that, it's not just that we are saying that there are no contingencies or there are no ties attached, but there are possibilities in where countries could be helped in ways that are productive, in ways that are suitable for them. For example, is the Turkey example in Somalia right now, where they have greatly contributed to the redevelopment of the national security sector and also vast other sectors, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's education, whether it's scholarship. So that level of, and also there's people-to-people collaboration between Somali entrepreneurs and Turkish companies. So that level of cooperation and that level of respect and that level of an international community versus the Horn of Africa could be possible. I know also Turkey is working greatly in Ethiopia. So those are the two things that I wanted to highlight, how national unity and also beyond national unity among the people of the region. I think that has been self-evident lately. This platform is one of them. It's also been evident in social media, sort of people coming together once they see issues that are happening in Somalia or Ethiopia or Eritrea. They don't see those issues as sort of isolated issues, especially if it's affecting the sovereignty, the dignity, the territorial integrity of people. They know those issues are not going to stay in those sort of borders that Sister Jawahir talked about. Also has a lot of issues in terms of the colonial baggage that's left behind. So those are the things that I wanted to further comment on. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Sister Horo. Yeah, so Brother Shafir, you're there? Shafi, not Shafir, Shafi. Are you there? I don't see him. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, because he wanted to reflect on this, on the Horn of Africa rapprochements. Okay.
Do you want me to touch the question you were asking?
Yeah, the one I directed to Sister Hor. Oh, yes. Why not?
So I think, it's quite interesting in terms of when you look at Somali, the national unity or clan system. And I think, they interlinked, I don't think you can differentiate because obviously, it's a reality that we are, it's our heritage. We came from different clans. And the issue is, I think, it's not a problem to belong to certain clans, because that is, our, heritage. That's where we belong to. That is our, great fathers, ancestors, and so on. The issue is when, this is used to harm others. So that is the problem. And obviously, as a faith, we're Muslim, and it clearly states that we use a different clan system to recognize each other, and I always said, in terms of myself, Somalis, because obviously, if you look like, Nigeria, like countries who have, speaking, so many, hundreds of different languages, and, different tribes and different, cultures. And Somalia, we have, the privilege, and, to have that, language and culture and religion that all, actually, and are the same. We may have our differences, but in terms of Somalis marry each other, majority of them, they intermarry. They So I always said, actually, Somalis are extended families. I wouldn't say, because if you talk to someone from Somalia and, ask their ancestors, at some point you're going to be connected, to that person, because either your grandfather or grandmother or your auntie or your uncle, or, you related to somewhere. So that's why I always said, Somalis are connected. They are, extended families. And the problem comes when that, clan system is used in a way that actually harms others, instead of bringing the resources. Like in the past, people used to, share resources to support each other, and of course sometimes creates conflicts. But I think if you want Somalis to have that national unity, approaching through, and from my, understanding and my, views is, we need to, promote this mandate in terms of, you can be, whoever you are, in terms of clan system or any region or wherever you come from. But at the end of the day, you're Somali, and that's what connects to us. And we have that common interest. All of us, we love our country, we love our people, and no matter what's happening now, if someone sees, Somalis who are, for example, struggling, it doesn't matter where clan they come from or which region they come, they're going to go and support them. And so that is our culture, that is our heritage. And even, when the most difficulties and civil war was happening, people still were, interclan support, supporting each other and saving each other, neighbors saving each other, relative, saving each other. So we are interconnected. And I think, using that kind of positive side, I think, clan and Somali unity can be made, hand in hand, without saying, oh, don't use a clan system, just we use, national unity, which actually sometimes can, create itself an issue, because you're trying to ignore or, and suppress some sort of heritage of the people. And so we need to, enhance and promote the positive side of our clan system, and, eliminate, those that, that are creating the harmful, narrative and harmfulness. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you, Madam Jawahir, for that. I wanted to start with this, but now I will say it, even if it's towards the end. I have one more question before we end it. As an Ethiopian, it's always you raised that important part where you said, even if it's your heritage, the clan, yes, you have the privilege to have a this one religion, one culture, one language, but still you have this clan, and it has been your heritage, and people have lived with that clan system in the past, and without having war necessarily against each other. So there must be a way. But also I want to extend that you said, if we all Somalis are, if we check each other, you said we become like one big extended family somewhere, somewhat you are all connected. The same way I feel like the same example I want to take to the Horn of Africa society, or also at large in Africa. Somehow we are one big family, and what's happening in Somalia is also should affect what's happening in Ethiopia in some way. Also, what's happening in Ethiopia also will affect what's happening in Kenya, and we should see that we should definitely take that example, and to bring that regional cooperation amongst each other, because whether we like it or not, we are destined to live together, being a neighbor, and we can't avoid each other. So we have to know that way of that, we did cohabit together. So we have, it's not something new that we are trying to do. So there should be a way to do that, and hopefully it works also inwards for Somalis, to avoid their differences and focus on their common interests. But one thing that I learned and I wanted to make a habit is, personally for me, as an Ethiopian, we have seen a war, at least in our age, since 1991, the intervention or the invasion, also we can call it, by the US of Somalia, and then having that war for the past two decades. And then as recent as 2008, also Ethiopia had that war against or with Somalia, or against Somalia, which we were actually more of kind of serving as a Trojan horse for the US. So, you just get, this is a typical example that Sister Horo were talking about. We have been that victim of psychological warfare or the media warfare, that you just believe what is told on the media, and you think that what the government does is right. So I'm not talking on behalf of Ethiopia. I'm speaking for myself, because I thought this is a very healing way of to have a healing conversation amongst each other. So I feel sorry that I have not been a voice when that happened against Somalis, that I'm sorry that I have not been a voice that when that happened in Libya, that I'm sorry that I have not been a voice when that happened also in Yemen, Syria. But now that we know more, that's why we say, loudly, no more, because we have seen it in Ethiopia exactly what happened, and we say no more. What's going to happen in Somalia will affect me, and we have seen exactly. You are trying to follow the same. I'm speaking for myself again. So the same measure, so we know where this is going to lead, but also. Not only on social media that we should have this unity, but we should bring that inwards, and also practically, as we are doing here on this platform, but also, to take it beyond talking. I want to ask you, what do you expect from your Ethiopian brothers and sisters, or Kenyan, or anyone in this time, as you are having this problem now in Somalia, or in the future, and we shouldn't have necessarily a problem to unite. But what do you expect? Where do you think we can work together to bring that unity? Let's start it, like me and you, and then maybe we take it somewhere, to our family, to our friends. What do you expect? What can be the first step to bring that unity amongst in the Horn of Africa? Let's start it now. Sister Hodo, you want to take this?
Sure. Let me try. I think that is a great way of taking the conversation further, as to, in terms of solutions within the region of East Africa, the solution among people. What are the ways that we can move forward together in a positive, sort of cohesive region? And I think actually starting from our discussion today, I think the number one tool against the intervention, against disinformation, against the psychological sort of terror is, number one, awareness, knowledge, empowering ourselves to say no more, but also to say, you know what, I don't understand all the complexities of this particular country, but this particular country I care about, this particular country is within my region, and I want to know more about it. I want to investigate. I want to do research. I want to be a voice of the people that are either being exploited or facing kind of difficulties. I think, and what we have been seeing, obviously, I think it's not limited to social media, but there have been also protests and there have been some writings, is people getting that consciousness, coming together and finding out, maybe not sort of a dictionary of all the issues, particularly in Somalia, what has been happening in the past 30 years, but also finding out, you know, in 2008, TPLF invaded Mogadishu as a Trojan horse for the US. A lot of people, they are great people, they're good people, but they just didn't know all the complexities, all the issues that were happening. And I think, number one, knowledge, empowering oneself to find out more. Every one of us has responsibility. I know in the past we look towards, you know, big organizations or big media to tell us what to think. But with the advent of social media, it sort of, even though it has some problems, it sort of democratized information. So number one, I would say awareness, empowering oneself, finding out more, finding out where you can be an ally, where you can be an advocate, where you can be a supportive. And I think the best way to sort of tackle intervention, disinformation, misinformation is knowledge and knowing and finding out and taking the time to do research and read and sometimes even maybe question things and say, you know what, I have colleagues, I have friends, I have people that I know from Somalia, people that I know from Eritrea, people I know from Ethiopia. If I think something that I see that's quite fishy, that doesn't make sense, let me find out. So I think all of that is part of the solution and moving forward together in a positive way. Also, one of the things that Jawahir also talked about, is sort of a long-term solution is to have not just government to government cooperation, but also people to people cooperation, people finding out what's going on, having these kind of platforms and extending it to much wider groups of people. And I think that's a much better way to reach consensus and also to be a force for each other in a positive light.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Horo. Okay. Yeah, let me just read one comment here. The birds of a civilizational state. This is a decade. This decade is a decade of African unity. The African people are awake, and so their narrative will be heard. That's Africa Reimagined. Okay. If before this will be also like kind of our final points to make because we are reaching time. Yeah, we have 8 minutes. I want to purposely, I want to bring Madam Jawahiri to give us that blessing at the end of the session and to close it. But before that, if Dr. Samuel, if you are with us, do you have some final word to share with us? Are you there, Dr. Samuel?
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Mahlet. There was so much going on here for the past almost 2 hours. I've really enjoyed it. As Fodo was mentioning, we need to enlighten ourselves about each other. We shouldn't listen to we don't need to listen to others from outside of this region to tell us about the Somalis, the Ethiopians, and the Eritreans. And one challenge which has surfaced for centuries, particularly post-colonial Africa, is a blockage of this information. So as Hodo was mentioning, social media has democratized information, and then at least we can positively utilize it to inform ourselves about what goes on around us. So to me, like the Horn is a family, and that needs to be reinforced. That needs to be improved and promoted. When Johar and Hodo was mentioning, responding to the question of stateship and the important contribution, particularly clanship in Somali culture has, I was contemplating to respond to that question. Before the advent of colonialism, Somalis, to me, I can be excused, were not only Somalis as well. They're citizens of the Horn of Africa. You have clans who are in Somalia, still in Ethiopia. You have clans in Kenya, and you can find them in Djibouti, the Isas, the Isaks, the Hawiya. You can mention a lot. So they have these regional identity than an identity which is only fixed on a certain post-colonial boundary state. The same thing can hold true for most Ethiopians. We're everywhere. We're in all of the countries surrounding us. So that kind of solidarity needs to be worked a lot. And as Hodo was mentioning about, speaking of this humanitarian vernacularism, which I was also mentioning about, the Somalis have a very strong culture of the self-support systems. They have the social networks that they have is very exemplary, to the extent that the diaspora has been the lifeline of the Somalis, the Somali state and the Somali people, which is also common among many African customary and traditional systems. We have that knowledge, but the challenge that came along with colonialism is the fact that the system has produced scholars like ourselves, which are very much distanced from their own culture. So, like with our learning, our education has not contributed much to improving and uplifting whatever rich culture that we have in our societies. Conflict between clans has been there, territoriality, issues of resource has always been there, but all clans have coexisted together. That's the story that we have. Even before before modern state formation, modern politics has taken place and shaped countries of our contemporary time. So that will be always there, but we had also the skills which we often ignore, the skills, the knowledge that resolved those challenges, those conflicts. Are we using them now? Are we using these legal plural forms of governance, legal plural forms of sanctioning? So we need to look inwards and improve and inform our education system so that our our students would know much about their own cultures, their own modes of governance, their own modes of punishment, their own vernacular ways of supporting one another. So there is much, there is a lot that we share in common, and then we need to invest on that. And speaking of also the mention of the African Union and the role it will have, when Johar was giving explanations about that, to me, the African Union has been a reaping giant. It's not proactively engaging and speaking up to raise the voice of its member states. That is why I often would prefer to advocate for more regional integration and cooperation, trading between one another, cultural exchanges between one another. So as far as we have a very strong regional institutions, we could forge the advent of a very strong African Union. Without it, I think it's very difficult. The kind of political space that the union has now is not good enough for the institution to speak freely, because as Johar was mentioning, most of the funding comes from the West or the East, and Africans are not doing a lot, helping a lot in terms of raising funds to support and to fund their own development, be it infrastructure, be it anything within the continent. So as far as we don't work on that, we cannot increase our political spaces to make decisions or to embark on decisions that help improve the lives of our societies. So we should start small. We should start small. I mean, like we should start from exchanges between scholars, making families and friends like this one. And this shouldn't have to stop here. I would look forward for myself to learn a lot about what goes on in Somalia. And then I hope our brothers and sisters from Somalia also would want to know more about Ethiopia. And this kind of scholarly engagement needs to continue. And to me, I think what I would like to propose is, if Mahlet accepts to take this challenge, to form a certain group where we can regularly meet and inform one another of the developments happening in the region, political, economic, social, cultural, whatever it can be. So this kind of platform needs to be strengthened and supported, and I'm very happy to contribute my share to that. So that's what I would like to say. And today I have learned a lot. I've met good friends, and thank you, Mahlet. And I would look for more discussions of this type in the future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samuel, Brother Samuel. Yeah, really, that's a great input. Thank you. Madam Jawahiri, so what will be your final word to share with us?
And I think, Hodan and Dr. Samuel took, most of stuff I wanted to say, and I agree with them. I will add in terms of what they already said, in terms of initially you were saying, Mahlet, yourself, like, when you repeat, in terms of the propaganda, in terms of the fake news, or that people at the end, start to, taking in, isn't it? And also thinking it's true. And so I think, it's about one side is Hoda, mentioned in terms of awareness raising. For me, it's about changing the mindset of our citizens, in terms of what the Somali citizens or citizens in the whole. So I will say two, for example. First, the Somali citizens, in terms of is the clan system, bigger and more important than your, national, citizenship. And I think, as a Somalis, sometimes, the citizenship in being a Somali, is not something that has been, I think, in terms of promoted enough to, make that, people are more in terms of aware and also more conscious and giving more, and weight and value in terms of, as Dr. Samuel said, Somali Nimo, which is, I think, the most important element here. And I think that is, sometimes what is lacking, and especially those, young people, the youth, in our country, we said, over 70% is, and the population is a young generation. And many of them, haven't, grown up in terms of stable and political sustainable, environment. And so their reference, like, for example, their reference is just, destruction and civil war and, warlords, and that's what they have, able to reference. While, like, my generation, who had opportunity to grow up in Somalia, Mogadishu, educate there, I had, opportunity to, be a lecturer in Mogadishu University and take my early, years in my country. I have different reference in terms, because I know what, like, nationhood is. What is, for example, my mother's, participated in what we used to call, iska wax u qabso, which is like, is actually, do for yourself in terms of, Somalis were doing a lot of volunteering after their work, to build, the schools, to build, a lot of, and projects and developmental projects. And so, we know, like, for example, what nationhood means. While, I think a lot of young generation, unfortunately, they don't have that reference. And so on, how can we create, the importance and the sweetness of nationhood, and how can we bring back the Somali Nimo? I think that's the key. And I think we have to utilize the technology to use that. And this kind of platform, I think, is one of them, bringing people together to actually discuss and when we talk, then you have solutions. It's always like that. When you talk, then you find also solutions as well. When you discuss the challenge, you will be able to, creatively identify the solutions. And I think in terms of the Horn of Africa as well, as, post the colonial, era, there was a lot of, divisions, within the African continent, and also that, conflicts and hate that has been created and then had imprinted in people's a lot of people's kind of mind. And so it's time we change. It's time we need to change that narrative and change into a positive and we call Somali Walal Nimo, Dr. Samuel, which is the brotherhood, sisterhood. So create that across the whole of Africa, and again we can use the technology to and create that awareness and change the mindset and attitude of people, because when people see the positive, it's more likely they're going to follow. And I also echo with Dr. Samuel in terms of maybe let's take this further and maybe create a platform where we have more informal chat, maybe we have more creating and add up more friends and families and create that more and a bigger kind of platform that actually connected to that common goal, connected to that common interest in the Horn, because we have common interest. And I think what unites us more than one actually and dividing us. I remember when I was studying in France, and there was that time actually you look for any you look any black person, you look any, because when you experience the racism, you experience the isolation as a black person, any person you see in the far that is black is becoming like your brother, your sister. And so and what important is in terms of having such kind of what means being black in the West. How important it is to unite, because you have experienced racism, you have experienced being isolated or being disadvantaged because of your color, because of your background, because of where you come from, and so on. And we have African continent, which is the most richest continent in the world, that everyone is competing in the world, yet we are the poorest in the world. So I think we're not naive. We know the complexity and challenges, but I think we can overcome if we perseverance, determination, and consistency, continue our dialogue, our understanding, our kind of looking forward in terms of how can we improve the livelihood of our nations. I think that's the most important. That's a common goal that can unite us. And Mahlet, thank you very much for creating such wonderful platform tonight and inviting us to have this meaningful discussion. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for those enlightening words from you. Thank you. But yeah, so it has been, we are on top of our hour. But I want to say this finally. First of all, I gladly accept the challenge. And I actually further also, I don't know if that's what you meant, Dr. Samuel, I go and further propose maybe once in a week time, since now the dynamics are fast in the region, can organize such a discussion, just like what we have, where we hear what's happening in Ethiopia, what's happening in Somalia from the mouths of Ethiopians or Somalis. But also, we are now the first, let's be honest that we, as much as we can, try to bring those people. If I ask now, I got great sisters here, which I'm very happy, and also brother Shafi, when we bring another Somali speakers, even if they have a difference from us in our view, still we need to learn that kind of listening and giving an ear and talking, and at the end of the day to say there's a country which is above all of us. So I will be happy. You can suggest people, speakers to bring from the Somali point of view, and then also from Ethiopia. If something is happening, God forbid, we don't want any problem in the region. Also the same if anything happens in Kenya. So yeah, I can dedicate that time once in a week, according to our, if it's suitable for us, and we can talk about it once in a week. I will be happy. And what you said also with the chat group. So my final words are, I always say this as a Pan-Africanist, I in Ethiopian life expectancy, I feel like I lived more than half of my that expectancy age or that lifetime. So it always makes me scared and make my blood cold when I think of I have 2 children. What am I living for them as a Pan-African? Am I just talking and then living? Like, what am I teaching them? Because if we really, I am a believer of, a strong believer of, we have to invest as much as we talk and try to learn in our age with our with our people, with our families, or people in our age. We should also invest the same for the younger children, even for the children that we are raising, for our nieces, for our nephew, for our cousins. It doesn't matter. We need to invest. Just imagine everybody invests time on their children, being a Horn of African country or as an African in general. In 20 years, Africa don't need anything. It will just be fine. If we really, in 20 years, those children will grow up, and they grow up with the things that we teach them, and Africa will just be fine. That's really my dream, and I think it can be done. So now when we close this session and go, let's try to teach them, something that's an African, something that we are taking as a principle, as a motto to live by. Let's bring that now to the children and invest it. So I think that's also a long-term solution for the continent, and also for the region. If I go out from here tomorrow and I see that Somalis, and if I don't open my heart and my mind to listen to them, and then what is the point of here? So we need to, we have to be the change itself, and also not only on ourselves but also on the younger generation. That's my final message, and thank you very much for your time. I'm very happy that we had this session, and good night, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.